So good morning, everybody. That's very impressive. Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Everybody's on time. That's wonderful. It's Tuesday. Is it Tuesday? Oh, it's Tuesday. You see? I thought you may not notice. So people are awake. That's an older trick. So welcome to EU Cyber Policy Day. My name is Jörg Ladig. I'm a partner at Jones Day in the cybersecurity practice, and I have the pleasure of introducing the speakers for this morning's session. And I start right away with Jakob Dusach, who is the Cyber Attaché Digital Affairs Unit coming to us from the Permanent Representation of the Republic of Poland to the EU, which is a very long title, Jakob. And we're looking forward to hear a presentation on the EU cybersecurity agenda 2025, 2029. What does it mean for industry? And so we're very curious to hear about, giving us an overview of the Commission's cybersecurity priorities and agenda for the next 3 years. Thank you, Jakob.
Thank you very much for introduction. Thank you all for coming here. Also, first session. This is gonna be the mood of the conference. I'm really sorry you got the government guy to speak the first, but when you have topic like that, you take the government guy. So, quick disclaimer. I am a government guy, but I am not a commission guy. I'm working for permanent representation of Poland to the EU. And yes, this is mouthful. My official title is even longer. The longer your title is, the less important you are, So this is where we are. This is an expert presentation. But please always take this grain of salt that I am working for a national government. So I am partaking in those negotiations as a government. This is slightly different perspective than if you are doing it as an expert, as you do consultations. I have opinions, and those opinions are coming from Warsaw. So those documents are very often in preparation. They are changing. I'll speak of it as is, and it is 24th of March 2026. Don't take it out of context. It may change within few months, few weeks, and hell, we don't know what's going to happen next week. Easter is sometimes busy here. Also, the scale here is pretty long because we are talking about 2029. Legislation process is long. Many things can happen. Please include that. And this is definitely kind of expert foresight. I've been here for a while. I'm doing this for a while, but I am in no way fortune telling. I have lost terrible bets regarding CRA in the past. I'm better now. So famously, I was working for the Commission in the past, and I said that CRA is just a fad and nothing big will come out of it. And I was working on EUCC in the same time. So you can understand why I was thinking that. And I was terribly, terribly wrong. So I will just try to get as many facts as I can. I will give little hints of what I think may be important. But remember always that this is a big, complex environment. So very quickly. What is the framework now? Currently, we have 3 main laws that are forming something we call unofficially cybersecurity framework. We have CRA that you all know and love. We have CSA, and we have NIS directive. NIS directive is with us since 2016. It's a directive, so it has been implemented slightly differently with all member states. And it has been reviewed in 2022. And we have another minor review that I will talk about it soon. But please take a note, this is a directive about cybersecurity of entities, and it doesn't really touch products unless the entities are using those products, because then we're gonna go into CRA, into NIS, into cybersecurity certification and all that. But NIS 1 and NIS 2 were directives. I'm pretty sure NIS 3 will be already a regulation, because from what we can see, the fact that we have different requirements in Europe is getting slightly problematic, especially when we are talking about product security. The second topic is CRA. You all know it, you all love it. This is why you're here. I will not dwell on it, but just remember, It will be partially enforced soon. It will be fully enforced much sooner than we think. And we are now in pretty advanced stages of implementing it because it will take, of course, some time to use it efficiently. And then finally, Cybersecurity Act graced our presence in the year 2019 and was already, in my opinion, didn't fit the environment. I still remember the lovely times of 2017 when the biggest problem we had was incoming GDPR, a little Kaspersky scandal, and maybe, I think not Petya was around that time. 2017 was not Petya. So suddenly getting 2019, that it was already not fitting. We are now improving. Commission has proposed a new draft on that, and this is how we work. There are other regulations, but those are the main ones. We also have Cyber Solidarity Act. We have 5G toolboxes. We have risk assessments, but don't worry about it too much right now. So, very quickly, why we have this framework? Is it really that bad? So, normally, charts like that are optimistic, but this is the number of reported incidents in Europe since 2015 until last year. I don't like the direction of this. I must say that at some point when I was preparing this graph, I saw that there is a little dip at 2022, and I thought this is wonderful. There was some change there is no clear trend, but then I realized I missed a zero. It was not 107 incidents, that was 1,070 incidents. So my optimism was short-lived. But why do we need concerted efforts? Because almost 40% of all incidents, this is all ENISA data, okay? This is all data from European Agency for Cybersecurity. Almost 40% of all attacks are targeting public administration. This is a significant change. Earlier it was around 20%. 80% of all code that was inspected during the incidents reported by CSIRT was containing some sort of ransomware at this stage or another. And almost 43,000 new vulnerabilities were disclosed in 2025 alone. We are advancing. I must say, this is the ugliest one. Do you have to make a picture of this one? I will fix that later. I will send it up fixed. But anyway, we are not in a good spot, and we are improving. But we are still, we are learning more. We realize how the situation is much worse. So we are getting better with transposition of NIS2 directive, but we still are at 21 countries transposed the directive. And you still have some big players that haven't succeeded in doing that. Please note that this is NIS2 directive, which means that we also have NIS1 that was, I believe, now implemented everywhere. NIS2 builds on NIS1, so this is not like France, Spain, and Netherlands don't have anything. They have NIS1 regulation, which is very much in line with NIS2, but we are still missing this catch-up. And yeah, Poland got this, had this implemented like a month ago, so we are very freshly blue. Okay, so there has been a cybersecurity package published in January. What's going to change? So there's going to be a new mandate for European Cybersecurity Agency. There's going to be new tasks, increased budget and staffing, and there's going to be mixed financing model. They want to, I believe, around 17% is supposed to come from fees, and the rest is supposed to come from the EU budget. How it's going to look like, how much of this is going to work, it depends on the negotiations, it depends on the Council, on the Parliament, and what Commission is going to put on the table. Because this is just Commission proposal. Then we have a new cybersecurity certification framework, which changes that we will not have, for example, SCCG. Instead, we'll have the assembly that will be much broader and more open. There will be strict deadlines for preparation of certification schemes, and the procedure is much more streamlined, in my opinion. And we have a new type of certification schemes, which are cyber posture, which is generally understood as cybersecurity of entities. Think ISO 27000. But there is a complete new thing. It's supply chain security. This is about EU-level identification of high-risk vendors and how to deal with them. It is based on security or cybersecurity risk assessments done by member states in cooperation with Commission, and then identification of key ICT assets, making sure they are secure. Many people focused so much about the CSA2 that they forgot that there is also NIS2 proposal that has slight changes in scope in comparison to what we've done in CSA, which is completely new regulation. This is just very targeted amendments. We have introduction of a new category of small mid-cap enterprises. We have change in scope on some sectors. Mostly you can go into annexes and see this is very specific. New entities has been added, such as European Business Wallet and submarine cables. There has been changes in policy, such as the need for member states to include post-quantum cryptography in their strategies, to report about paid ransomware. There's like how many entities in your territory has paid ransomware. So I need to stress this is a proposal. Not everyone loves everything about this proposal, but this is what we got on the table. And then ENISA will be able to better support entities. There will be also a minor change in requirements. So cyber posture was identified as a remedy for lack of harmonization on the EU level. Please remember there are like 27 member states. That means 27 different ways of implementing a directive, everyone with a slightly different flavor. Cyber posture is supposed to equalize that before we get to NIS3. And we'll have a much stronger harmonization of requirements for cross-border entities, because this is where, by proportionality rules, the EU can do the most. There are also some things about implementation of Cyber Resilience Act. We have some delegated acts, either published, ongoing, or planned. So we'll see. You have that pretty well described in the newest CRA guidelines that are available on Commission website. Single reporting platform is being developed, and there is also something we discussed, single entry point. You might have missed it completely because it's not in CSA or NIS2. It's in one of 12 omnibus regulations that have been prepared by the Commission. And now we have very heavy discussion on how to make sure that this, how we can simplify incident reporting, how should we make it easier for businesses. And then there has been preparation of some cross-cutting issues and guidance. Of course, you have guidance to support implementation that has been recently published. There is medical devices in vitro devices regulation, which gonna contain some new provisions about cybersecurity. I mean, more than before, which was be cyber secure, and that was the end of it. Now there's gonna be a bit more in line with CRA, we hope. And then there is a still ongoing discussion about the interplay between EUCC and CRA, but I believe there will be some colleagues in the room that will explain better than I do. And finally, still upcoming, the interplay between CRA and AI Act. Now, what is the goal of all of that? How will this impact the industry? So the goal is to obtain a coherent, well-working system that will cover all the essential areas of cybersecurity. But we still need to remember that it must be a proportionate system, because we have both the member state layer and you have European layer. We use CRA because this is how we treat our single market. But we still have a lot of cybersecurity requirements on national level, and we need to make sure that we are working well with companies. We need to protect our critical infrastructure, and finally, we need to hear many of you colleagues from industry that will help us make the framework more efficient. So, what's going to happen now? We are now around this stage. Sorry, is there a laser? Yes. So we are now here. So we are now, the proposal has been published in, I believe, January. And now the CSA2, as we call it, and NIS2 amendment are now being discussed in the council. We are going for it article by article, and you will probably soon, because the different language versions has been already published on EURLEX website, so you can read it in your national language. And that means that we will soon see government positions to that. So we'll have a clear understanding of who stands where. And this is where the real discussion will start. But remember that we need to look into this. Basically, CSA is now 3 acts because you have completely different rules for ENISA, You have completely different people talking about certification, and finally, supply chain security is gonna take a lot of time. So we'll have those 3 discussions. They are more or less intertwined because whenever you are talking about certification, this is gonna be, the scheme is gonna be prepared by ENISA. ENISA needs funding, so we are going there, and we need that for supply chain security, so we are going, you see, this is all connected. There is still something for it to work together. So it may take a while, and then we'll have to go, after we discuss it, I guess it will take us a year and a half, is my assessment. Again, remember, I'm terrible at foreseeing things. I'm terrible optimist. And then we'll move to the trilogue phase. What is a trilogue? If you don't know EU speak, this is where the parliament comes in, and the parliament has their opinions. So this is going to be interesting because you don't have to work, member states and commission discuss on the position, and then we start looking at it also with the parliament. Then this is where the real negotiations start. And this is very, very important. And only then we can start talking about the act being enforced. So on one hand, this is looking like far future. We are talking about 2.5 years before it's all done. So we are getting closer to 2029 because I believe we'll have it done before 2029. But remember that this is like a snowball. It's very slowly starts with a commissioner or President von der Leyen saying something, oh, it would be nice to, and then suddenly 3 years later you have completely different situation on the market. So don't lose it out of your vision. Reach out to your partners on that, prepare positions. I'm talking as a member state. We absolutely love industry positions. We don't see everything. We cannot be everywhere. We have our experts at home, but whenever we get an industry position, this is really, really helpful. So personally, send them to me. I'm very happy for that because whenever we think we got something covered, there is another industry that we completely lost, we haven't seen, didn't know exists because there is like so much business out there. And yeah, we need to see that because we don't have a full vision all the time about everything. Thank you very much for your attention. I fit in 20 minutes, so we still have time for some questions if you have any. Do we have any questions? More questions? I believe everything was clear. I'll take it as a compliment.
Maybe I ask one just to keep the conversation going a little bit and we have some time. Jakub, in terms of this supply chain security, right, and the high-risk vendors, what is the Commission's thinking behind that? How does it work practically to define these high-risk vendors? Or what's the system? And what countries maybe has the Commission in mind with that?
So
just generally, right? I think, to make it a bit more practical for folks.
You set up a nice minefield for me, and I will gladly walk into it. Okay, so it's a two-parter. So first of all, but that's also why I didn't want to talk too deeply about the regulation because it was something prepared by the Commission. It works differently in different member states, but on the European level, this is basically Commission proposal. This is why it's called like that. And now we can change everything. To give you just to give you a perspective, during Polish presidency, when there was a proposal of the Commission on cybersecurity blueprint, this is like a guidance on crisis management. We have changed everything except one paragraph. We have changed everything. So this is a proposal. Now we're going to work on it. So there are some provisions in there that I must say immediately I do not enjoy. The definition of high-risk vendor is an entity that has been identified as a high-risk vendor or is coming from a country that is indicated as high risk. That looks a bit like anti-money laundering thing, so something that is like, those countries are risky, please take extra attention when doing your risk assessments, but instead of giving entities or member states ability to make this assessment, they are going straight, and here are the provisions that apply. Do not exclude them from public procurement, exclude them from certification, exclude them from CRA, etc., etc. But it is not something, for example, that we enjoy, because in Poland we believe that there should be a full process of identification. There should be right to oppose it in court and so on and so on. There should be the whole democratic process. But where did it come from? I dare not to guess. But if you look at it, we have been working on high-risk vendors concept since, I believe, 2019. We had around 2018, 2019, we had 5G cybersecurity toolbox and 5G cybersecurity risk assessment. And it was a soft tool for member states to identify, that was obliging member states, among others, to identify high-risk vendors. And many member states, although they agreed to that toolbox, they didn't do any steps toward that. For Poland, it took, oh God, 7 years, 6 years to push legislation about it. And some member states still didn't manage to do that. So I believe that there is a need to regulate that on EU level, because clearly there was room for member states. They tried to catch up. They tried to do it their own way. The system doesn't work very well when you try to regulate products on member state level. So now what I hope we'll end up with is a sort of dual system, when we'll have the national security issues regulated on national level. So in case of Poland, we have now cybersecurity law that regulates also high-risk vendors. That's mostly about access to critical infrastructure and so on. And on EU level, we'll be able to properly identify high-risk vendors and mark them, for example, exclude them from the highest cybersecurity requirements, which is providing, for example, a certified products. Because this is something that we cannot do on national level. I cannot regulate single market on national level.
Well, thank you very much, Jakub. And I saw a question, and you managed nicely to navigate the minefield. That was not my intention, of course. I see a question right here. If you could state your name and your organization.
Lars Thorsen from Norway, and my organization is NEMCO, certification vendor. Yeah, you partially answered the question that I have already, but I'm making the assumption that the list of high-risk countries and vendors will be provided, maintained, and actually made by ENISA. Is that a correct assumption, and that it will be a cyber risk intelligence effort?
So the process, as it is now in the Commission proposal, is that the identification will be through first risk assessment, which is done by Commission with ENISA and member states, but this is just risk assessment, the same as we did with 5G toolbox, or we have recently done with autonomous vehicles. And then Commission will start the process, and they will prepare implementing act. So there will be an implementing act. This is executive way of making law in Europe. So this will be proposed by Commission and then agreed with member states. So this is what Commission is proposing.
Okay, so the actual experts will not be the ones.
The experts will be the ones who will make the risk assessment.
Okay.
So they will do the risk assessment, but no one says what exactly need to be, there is not supposed to be a link. There's no implicit link because it's legislation. You can do with legislation whatever you want. There is no clear link. This is also something that we brought in the negotiations. This is something that we are also wondering about how it's going to work, because we would like to have the full process clear.
Fair enough, and thank you. My own country just stepped on all the mines 5 years ago when they started naming countries.
Do we have any more questions in the room? Yeah, there's one right there. Come over there.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for the introduction. It was very interesting for me. My name is Michael Meissner. I'm working as a certifier for BSI. And I'm only asking this question because you mentioned how much you like to step into minefields. So this question does not reflect my personal opinion. It is, if you want, maybe a devil's advocate question. Me being a certifier, I do not look for, political argumentation. I only look for technical justifications for assurance into IT security. And if you claim a provider or a vendor or maybe even a country is not trusted as a certifier, only looking at evaluation, I think if someone is not trusted, then I should not refuse certification. The contrary would be true. I should intensify certification really to find out whether the non-trust is justified or whether the IT product is secure. What would you say about that?
So this is not a minefield. This is a clear path I really enjoy walking down. Actually, this is one of the areas that Poland and Germany on certification front we are aligned, because we believe that certification is a technical process. So there are certain areas, because it depends what are you certifying. If you are certifying products that are standalone, absolutely fine. If you are talking about certifying services, people, entities, then you have the same as you do with, for example, access to classified information. You are taking not only technical aspects. We are not limiting ourselves to the only to the technical security, but also we are looking into human security, for example. And I think that the same situation is here. But this is why actually we were pretty happy so far. Expert opinion, because the government position will be out soon, but for now it's expert opinion. That it has been separated, because we had problems that you would have certification that would look into non-technical aspects. That would be really difficult to assess. So actually Poland is pretty happy with that being separated, because I can imagine there will be a situation when we don't want to have a certain product in our critical infrastructure, but for different reasons than technical. Mm-hmm. And this is why it is separate, and this is why we are supporting those things being apart.
Thank you very much. May I add 2 more points?
How much time we have?
We have 1 more minute. That's fine.
Okay, I only need 30 seconds, unless there is someone else who wants to ask a question. Is there?
I think that's fine.
Okay. If I was in your position, I would add 2 more things. First of all, actually the human aspects are partially also covered by common criteria, but common criteria can evaluate up to high security. So, but my additional answer is, why do we still have non-trusted vendors or maybe even non-trusted countries? Is because maybe, and just maybe, the attack is beyond high. So this is something that even an evaluation cannot cover. So I think partially, the label non-trusted might remain valid, even if we, do a very thorough evaluation with common criteria. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mindful of time, I think I will answer. We can discuss it during the break, but just to tell you, yes, we are mindful of all these other risks, and there are different ways to deal with them. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jakub. So this was really an excellent overview, I think, on what's happening in the next few years. Thanks again, Jakub. So now we're moving on to the next speaker, who's going to talk to us about the Cyber Resilience Act. So we're getting very practical. And he's going to present, hopefully, a very perfect roadmap for ICT manufacturers on the CRA. So please welcome Alex Leadbeater, who is the Technical Security Director at the GSMA, coming from us from the UK. Alex, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yes, good morning. A Brit working for a Swiss company. This always causes a certain amount of amusement. So I'm Alex Lobiter, as it says, GSMA's Technical Director for Security. What that essentially means is the Mobile Industry Trade Association Security Director, but not here with that hat on, although the badge says GSMA. Here to talk about ETSI, one of the 3 ESOs producing the standards for the Cybersecurity Act, or sorry, Cyber Resilience Act. Problem of talking about high-risk vendors and the rest of it from the previous presentation, got the wrong one. Definitely CRA today. So, I'm going to run through a set of things, if this will behave itself. It's going to behave itself? Maybe. Come on. There we go. Right button. Little bit of an introduction for ETSI, for those who don't know what it is. Hoping you're going to know most of this. It's the later stuff I'm going to concentrate on. But I want to start you with this. So it's always interesting when you catch the back of somebody else's presentation and you're late in. So apologies for that. I always like to start with a bit of a thought as to why we do standardization, certification, and also put regulation in place to cover some of this. And the key bit, I think, is very often lost in the bottom. People talk about high-risk vendors, they talk about common criteria, they talk about certification because it's going to solve the world and all its security problems. Nope, the attackers just simply try harder. The real key is the bit at the bottom, is does it bring European citizens actual end-user value? If the answer to that is yes, then it is brilliant. If the answer to that is no, and it simply adds cost, not so brilliant. So I give you these very much to think about. Why are we doing it? What is the purpose? And what are we going to get out of it? Not we're doing a bit of certification because we can. So with that set, I'll follow that theme through the rest of this. So a little bit on ETSI. One of the 3 European ESOs, ETSI Sen-Senelec, Sen-Senelec being based in Brussels, ETSI being based in the south of France. Unlike Sen-Senelec, which is predominantly member state driven, via the NSOs at least, ETSI is commercial. So it's the original home of GSM. If you have a mobile phone in your pocket, the reason you have a GSM mobile phone in your pocket, or the 5G, 6G versions thereof, is because that came out of ETSI. It is predominantly ICT and commercial based. But it does do a little bit of work for Europe, which is why I'm here. It has a cybersecurity group. I chair it. Not really interested in that. It works with some partners. We're not really interested in that either because you'll get the slides later. What we're really interested in is this stuff, the Cyber Resilience Act, which is why you've got me here this morning and one of the later panels that will follow. We have a dedicated working group. So if you're interested in where do I find CRA, how do I understand what we're doing along with Sen-Senelec? The answer is vaguely follow that QR code if it still works. I believe it does. We have a dedicated group run by a very nice lady called Sandra who runs that for me, and a whole load of structure. Again, I'm not here to talk about that, but I've stuck the slide up for it. What we're really here to talk about is the impact piece, which is why we're here and why we care. So a little bit on CRA just to set the position. I'm taking it that most of you know what it is and what its detail is, but we'll run through this as we go. Rules for placing hardware and software on the market. Now, interestingly, unlike CSA and the things that went before it like RED, that was very much you placed it on the market, you forgot about it. CRA is very much more of that. So as we talk about the roadmap and the implications for this, we need to think about this as the whole life cycle and indeed how it interacts. Obligations for manufacturers, distributors, and importers. The previous presentation touched around this in terms of multi-jurisdictional, multinational aspects, but it's effectively whoever places the last bit of the product on the market is responsible for the lot, whatever that is. So if you don't place a product on the market because it's a subcomponent, and let's consider something like a mobile phone. So UICCs or the EUICCs are an element of CRA. Now, what gets really interesting is that is a Motorola handset. In theory, for European use, it was supposed to have an EU-certified EUICC in it. The problem with this is that that's manufactured in China, essentially by a Taiwanese company. So the only thing that is ever placed on the market is the eventual handset, not the SIM card. So it's a fairly complicated sort of model in terms of what ends up on the market, what's placed on the market. The EU ICC in that may never have actually been placed directly on the European market. It may not be available for purchase, but the handset is. So we have to build this up. Risk-based approach, I kind of like this because it's something that those of us who've been lobbying for sensible approaches to regulation have loved. The Commission obviously likes legal certainty. Lawyers like legal certainty. The great thing about CRA is they've gone, actually, let's just make it risk-based. Exactly how we'll measure that with the notified bodies and the competent authorities and the market surveillance authorities is an interesting question. But I always like to go for the one at the bottom of the screen. What is a product with a digital element? If you take CRA in its literal form, it is anything with a bit of digital electronics in it. So mechanical alarm clock with an LED backlight in it technically is a digital product. Now that is clearly bonkers. You're not going to do a cybersecurity certification assessment on an LED and a mechanical alarm clock. But that, in theory, is its scope. It's pretty all-encompassing, apart from the exemptions. This slide, actually, Camille, who's down the corridor about 2 doors that way, will probably end up sticking this slide up as well from the Commission. This is the Commission's version of the roadmap. Now, bear in mind, this slide is now about 6 months or so out of date, so some of the dates may change. But it gives you a feel of the point at which the standards will have to be produced and where they come from. There are the framework standards. There are the vulnerability standards, otherwise known as PT3. There are the product agnostic bit. The really thing, I guess, that you're all interested in is the bit at the bottom, which is the type C bits. They are the verticals. The thing to be aware of is the horizontal type Bs and the framework type As cannot be used for conformity assessment on their own. So if you want to follow a standard and you want to get your product certified either by using a notified body, self-certification, or going to one of the third-party labs that's up the corridor with the stands, you have to use a type C. Cannot use the Bs on their own. So one of the things that you have to ask yourself in this room is your product and service that's covered by the scope of CRA within one of the use cases of one of the harmonized standards that ETSI or Senelec are producing? If the answer to that is yes, awesome, you can use one of the vertical standards and you can probably do self-assessment unless it's a critical sensitive product. If you're not covered by the use case, bad news is you're queuing up for notified body assessment. Expensive, and I suspect there's going to be a really long queue. We'll talk about that shortly. So one of the real takeaways from this is, if you haven't read those standards, and they're all available largely on the internet for free as their drafts, you probably ought to go read them, because if your product and service isn't in that list, you're going to have a problem. So I've sort of talked about this already. PT1, as Senelec label it, is effectively the horizontal framework standard. Really thick document, some of it inspired by common criteria. There's nothing earth-shattering in it, but there is a lot of it. The vulnerability handling one, people need to be aware of. So it's interesting. For those of you who are familiar with EN 303645, ETSI's consumer IoT standard, one of the three, or vulnerability handling and reporting essentially is one of the top 3 provisions in that. What's interesting, and this is one of the things that you have to set in context with CRA when you look at the sort of the ICT and the IoT end, is that most of the requirements in the CRA, I would argue, are actually fairly pointless when they're applied to low-value products. Now, you may look slightly shocked by that. The reason is simple, and it goes back to EN 303645's base 3 provisions. No default universal passwords, keeping software up to date, and the vulnerability reporting stuff. Well over 50% of products on the European market still don't have a vulnerability reporting scheme or a means of handling it. So there is no point worrying about high-risk vendors, high criticality risk, if we can't sort the basic stuff out. So CRA is good, but it's interesting when I stand at the front and give these presentations, because the reality is we've got about 18 months to go, give or take, till CRA bites. and we're a long, long way off the level required for an awful lot of manufacturers to get anywhere near the complicated bits in CRA, let alone the simple bits. Anyway, there are 26 vertical categories in the standardization request. There are important products, there are critical products, and we're doing a load of standards. Now, where this gets interesting, and again, if I pick on the previous presentation, talking about high-risk vendors, predominantly in the telecoms sense, Etsy is producing a telecoms standard, essentially for covering mobile network kit. It is a clone of something called NESAS, which is GSMA's assurance scheme for mobile network kit. Mobile network functions are interesting things. I did a bit of a sort of looking at the CRA requirements when we looked at this. The average network function, let's take something like an AMF, the front-end authentication box that sits in a mobile network. To half of you, that probably means nothing. It's the first thing your phone talks to after the base station when you turn it on. When you say hello to the world, it goes, who are you, where are you going, and on which network do I need to talk to register you? That on its own spans approximately 46 of the 50 categories in CRA. They are massively complicated bits of kit. They've got operating systems, they've got secure processing, they've got pretty much all of the categories, and I can't remember what the 4 are. I really should look this up just so I can go, well, they haven't got a bit of that in. And it's basically, they're not consumer IoT devices from memory. So if you ignore the consumer IoT categories, it covers all of the rest of them. Now, the idea of CRA is that you use a harmonized standard to get presumption of conformity. Problem with that sort of kit is that you'd have to use all of them in that kind of, okay, now which order do I use them in? Now, we're attempting to sort of do some work with that. But the key thing is CRA works really, really, really well for simple IoT products. It will probably be great. It will drag the bar up, and the CE marking, if the European citizen ever bothers to look on the back of it to see is it certified or not, will probably add value. Quite comfortable with that. But for the really complex products that have got an operating system, they've got a firewall, they've got a VPN in them, exactly which one you are going to have to use in which order, interesting question. I'm looking forward to a number of the more forward-thinking member state bodies like German BSI, who I will call out because they are the most active in the standards space in terms of actually trying to practically think about how some of this stuff would work, so we'll call them out and say thank you to that. For the rest, I'm fascinated to see how this is going to drop out because they are really, really complex bits of kit. That said, most of the really complex bits of kit are already covered by national security legislation, so tend to have been fairly well evaluated anyway. But it's, given we've got 18 months to go, I wouldn't want to be a manufacturer at this point. So, conformity assessment, if you like articles in the CRA. Article 91. I mean, they ought to have, thought of creative numbering or something, so it had a ring to it when you put these up, but they didn't. Default category self-assessment. Now, clearly for certification purposes, that's not great, but for an awful lot of products, actually that's probably fair enough, providing the market enforcement is good enough to actually make sure people are bothered. Now, there's an interesting analogy in the UK. The slightly morbid moment, but one of the most common forms actually now of death at home in the UK is e-scooters. People go and buy them. They've got a nice CE marking on the back of them that says the battery's safe. People plug them in downstairs overnight charging, and then their house catches fire. They've got the CE marking on the back. It appears to be may catch fire is what this means. And they are happily buying them from large European marketplaces. Yes, the major retailer shops are probably not buying the cheap ones, but they are freely available on the likes of major European-based, not the Asian-based markets. You can get them off those as well. And citizens are buying them. It's an interesting quirk and a challenge we will have with the CRA is how do we make sure people actually follow it, not just write an arbitrary serial number on the back for the certification number next to the CE marking. It is one of my bemusements with this. I'm hoping CRA will have slightly more bite but it is a challenge that pre-exists. So as it says, important products, some of these will need assessment, some of them will not. The critical ones down the bottom, smart cards, secure elements, smart meter gateways, they will obviously need full assessment. But as I said, what gets really interesting is the smart cards. So if you think about the implications for things like EIDAS, and also the buying of smart cards, if we roll the clock back 4 or 5 years, UICCs were removable things. You went to shops and mobile phone manufacturers, the local operators would sell you one of those or give you one of the ones free in a supermarket, or if you ever step off an aircraft in a lot of countries, you get a free one as you exit customs. In those days, you could say, well, okay, European SIM needs to be certified under CRA. The challenge, as I've said, is that the world has moved on to these things where the SIM is soldered to the motherboard on the phone at manufacture in the Far East. You don't buy the smart card, it is supplied to you by Apple or Samsung or others soldered to the motherboard. So there's also some interesting challenges, as I've said, with CRA of actually trying to assess when that product is placed onto the market, if you're the importer or the distributor, of working out what's actually on that. The supply chain challenge is interesting. Design obligations, timelines, predominantly for manufacturers, gives you a feel for what you have to do. The critical bit, and this is where CRA massively differs from its predecessors, is the maintenance phase, which in theory, if you stick to the environmental legislation in Europe, is 5 years, or that is the expectation as to how long you are going to have to maintain your product. CRA doesn't require a 5-year maintenance life cycle, but the environmental sustainability rules probably do. Therefore, actually, you're going to spend more time maintaining the product under CRA than you will actually originally have done designing and assessing. CRA is a cradle-to-grave process, which means that you have to maintain CRA compliance through the life cycle, having placed it on the market. So unlike CSA and RED that went before it, which was pretty much you dumped it on the market and then you forgot about it, in the same way to a degree with the CE marking on some of the safety legislation, CRA requires you to keep the thing maintained, and any major changes to your product or service, if you do a major software update, may well require you to have to fully reevaluate the product. So if you change anything in it that may cause a major security vulnerability shift or other significant change, again, the notified bodies and others will have to work out exactly what this means, then you may well have to go round the loop again. So it's not a fire and forget. You're going to have to think about that slightly more. So products in scope, hardware, software, remote data processing. Again, this differs from CSA and RED, or CSA original, in that it does include some of the cloud element. Does not include hobby products. Now what that means is if you buy a load of kits of bits and you make some and then you sell some stuff on eBay or other marketplaces, they're not included. That's not a professional product. Does not include SaaS. So if it's a software-only cloud service that's essentially a professional service standalone, has no other direct user element, they're not included in the same way that websites aren't. So if you're buying a web service or other things, nope, that's not included. That said, it's not quite as simple as that, because if the website includes a PKI element and there's a security element in that, PKI is included. So it's also interesting as to how a number of the member states and the market surveillance authorities will determine what is in scope and what is out of scope, because it's not that binary. There are some explicit exclusions, thankfully. Cars, medical devices, aeroplanes, marine equipment, and anything military with a big gun on the front of it. Timelines. We are getting a bit late. So in theory, late 27 is when this all comes in. Now, I was chatting to some, for those of you who are familiar with Mobile World Congress, GSMA's big bash in Barcelona. I was doing a session there for some of this, talking to a number of manufacturers. One of the points I made was actually, if you've not started your CRA compliance journey for products being placed on the market now, you're probably already in trouble. as I've said, products already placed on the market get grandparent rights at the point of entry into force. That's great until you change them, because there's a vulnerability or you need to do a major software patch to them that alters the major software sort of based functionality. So if you do a major OS upgrade on a mobile phone, you roll, let's say, from Android 15 to 16 or whatever version we're up to, that may well count as a major change to the product, and therefore all of a sudden your product may have to be CRA compliant when it previously didn't. So for manufacturers, if you are now designing products and services, you probably ought to be reading those draft harmonized standards and making sure that you are vaguely already compliant to them or could be. And the same goes with the vulnerability reporting. If you haven't worked out how you're probably going to do that already, then you probably need to, because this isn't going to be a wait till August 2027 and go, do you know what, I probably ought to have a think about this. Your products, if they're going to be on the market for the next 5 years entering now, will have 3.5 or so years of CRA compliance, even if they're already in from the next major software update. So the timeline is a little more complex than it appears on paper. So challenges for the industry, keeping an eye on time. It is a step change. Mandatory certification in place, either self-certification or otherwise. Vulnerability reporting. I have my doubts whether putting all of Europe's vulnerabilities into a central database and then expecting somebody not to lose that database, given the number of people who are likely to have access to it, not necessarily convinced that's a brilliant idea. There's a reason that national governments tend to keep vulnerability databases fairly well classified and fairly well isolated, is to stop people losing these things. There's also an interesting question that let's say Germany discovers a vulnerability. That's great. It manages to work out whether its industry has sorted this. And I'll take the example of Poland, since you went previously. How are each of the member states going to work out that all of the products and services and all of the companies in all of the other member states have solved that vulnerability before they go public? The manufacturers are really, really good at this. So if you look at, for example, Ericsson as a major telecoms kit vendor, they know who all their customers are. They are really, really good at working out vulnerabilities, fixing them, patching all the networks before they disclose them. Doing that on a European level is going to be an interesting challenge. Sticking it in the database is the easy bit. Managing the release of the vulnerability and getting everybody to patch it before you go, we've got a vulnerability, or somebody else releases it somewhere else, is fascinating. It also has to be said for global manufacturers, you've got to stick the vulnerability in the European database, the Chinese database, the Indian database, the US database, and various others. They're all going to be competing with each other as to which one releases it first. This is going to end in stupidity, potentially, which is why industries tended to manage this itself. So beware. There are some timeline pressures. As I've said, CE marking enforcement is critical. CRA, although I joke about this a little bit, is brilliant in terms of it raising the bar. However, if the enforcement's not there, we are going to have a problem. It is arguably also incompatible with NIS2, RED, CSA, and the AI Act. Industry is going to have to sort this out. We have asked the Commission which one takes precedence over the others, and they've gone, well, they all take equal precedence because they're all legal mandates. You figure it out. Thank you very much. So, to the standards. There are a list of standards. You can read these. This slide was last updated, as it said, on the 24th of February. So it is about a month old. They have moved on. If you have a look on the Etsy portal and the Sensenelec portals, you can look these up. Some of them have advanced a bit. Talked about this. I stick this one up for EN 303645 just to remind people that although CRA is complex, if you can't sort the really basic stuff out, CRA is not going to help you particularly because you haven't done that lot. And as I always say to CEOs and other C-suite, under that sort of red-face elevator test, if you are willing to say that you have a product and service on the market that really doesn't sort out the central three, you're really not trying hard enough, are you? If you want to know how the standards are put together and the CRA methodology works, it works like this. Essential requirements, use cases. It's what I said to you. If your use case is not included in the HEN's base sort of coverage, you're into doing this yourself. So make sure your use cases are. Then it flows through to requirements at the bottom. In terms of the summary of the status, they are nearly finished. They need to be published and out for industry use by around about October. What this means is if you've not read the standards and you've not commented and you don't know whether your use case is in, you've probably got, in some cases, about 3 weeks left before the standards go for member state voting. They are not going to be happy with you now if you turn up and go, I'd like to add a load of stuff. But if you do want to make some minor tweaks, I would encourage you to join your Sensenelec NSO delegation, get yourself to Etsy, or make contact with myself or Sandra or others, and do that rapidly. Because if they're not in, you've got a problem. Public consultation, I leave this in because it's to say you can look at them and download them. All of Etsy's drafts are freely available. Most of Sensenelec's are, but they are more heavily restricted. You can get to them, but it's not quite so easy. And it should be said, the consultation has been open since September, so you have had plenty of chance to comment on this if you haven't done already. So if you haven't, please do. More information getting involved. There are some QR codes if you wish to snap them. There is a very nice site called Stand for CRA. That's where the EU is spending its money helping essentially businesses and private individuals and others take part in CRA activities. They have cash and they are funding things. If you're a European entity, I'm not, but I'm paid for by my own entity anyway, then there is an opportunity to get access to this if you're unable to do so because you can't take part due to funding. There's the link to the Etsy portals, those two that will get you to the documents. Thank you for your attention.
Yes, thank you very much, Alex. Do we have questions right here?
Wow, that was a lot. Josh Breckman from Oracle USA. We have about 8,000 products, and we are trying to figure out how we're going to address this. Probably, I guess my biggest question is about categorization, because we find the examples to be sometimes confusing. It's surprising, for example, that virtualization is considered an important product, but we look at our flagship product database and it seems to be considered a default. So what advice do you have as far as how to do categorization?
Probably queue up behind a notified body. As I've said, the challenge, especially for manufacturers like yourself, is CRA, I think, when it was written with sort of IoT mindset in mind of simple product services, things like this, that are relatively low or simple functionality. They're a single one-trick pony. For the others, it's going to have to be sort of grouped assessment. Now, what we have done in Etsy with the telecoms piece is to say, well, actually, we'll group a load of them up into what is a telecom standard. So if you're producing telecoms kit, that will be covered. What the Commission has acknowledged is the initial 26 standards or so are going to cover the major verticals. What they've then said is, if the industry wants to create more harmonized standards later, so beyond the 27 deadline, that actually cover the sorts of products you're talking about, then we are free to do so, and at which point you can then use them. But given the timeline they've set, that isn't possible at day one. So I think midterm, that's probably the answer, is the likes of yourselves and other similar category manufacturers to come together and say, right, can we describe what we think we should be doing? And then through Sensenelec or Etsy, actually just produce an HEN quite quickly. And then you've got your base. In the short term, it's going to be a scramble. So it's probably a good time to be having a conversation with the likes of German BSI or one of the other more advanced national bodies about how you're going to do this. The only other piece of advice I can give you is the Commission has unofficially said, and this is very unofficial, that they will be focusing on what the risks considered to be the high-risk products. Now, that's not high risk in the sense of high-risk vendor. That's high risk in the sense of things like the IoT ones where the security's crap and there's lots of impact. Big professional services things that you're probably doing good anyway, they've sort of said actually they won't direct the market surveillance authorities in that direction first because they don't have the bandwidth. They're going to start with the stuff that hits the consumers. So that isn't to say you haven't got to comply, but there does seem to be some flexibility in the mix unofficially.
We have one more question, and then we have to move on.
Thanks for the nice session. It was a lot to digest. I hope I can digest. My question is related to the important and the critical categories products. You mentioned like smart cards, secure elements are there. But does the softwares related to those components also comes under that category, like the middleware or the mini driver also comes under that category?
If they are critical to the core of the product, so let's take the UICCs as an example. So if they're critical to it, then it's bundled up with it. So, for example, the EUICC provisioning capabilities, because they're core to it, would be. If they're arbitrary uses of it, then no. So, for example, the banking applications that would use a credit card aren't, but the EUICC's provisioning capability probably is. So it's a matter of, is it core to the product and service as part of the bundle that goes with it, or is it what you do with it? And if it's what you do with it, that's different. The other thing to say is, if you have a product that has a critical element in it, not all of the product has to be certified to that level. And if you put a critical component in a non-critical product, you don't necessarily have to certify it to critical. So, for example, if you put an EUICC, high-grade crypto module, into a low-cost IoT device, then that doesn't automatically mean that that's got to be fully certified. That said, there's no reason why you shouldn't. So there is a sort of it's an end-use primary purpose question. If you choose to use high-grade stuff in low-grade applications, then you can downgrade based on the risk assessment.
Well,
Cool.
Thank you very much again. Very
Thank you.
practical presentation. Thank you. And we're moving on quickly. We have more seats here in the front. If you want to, don't be afraid to sit in the front. There's more seats here, please. So we're going to move on, talking about certification in practice from the EUCC to CRA conformity. And I'm very pleased to see that we have David Nozibor with us today. He's the VP of Sales at Red Alert Labs, coming from France. David, we're very curious to hear what you have to tell us about certification.
Hi, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So I'm going to be giving you this presentation on behalf of my colleague, the certification director of Red Alert Labs, Romain Muguet. Unfortunately, for a personal reason, he wasn't able to attend, and I will do my best to make him proud and share the work that we've been doing when it comes to leveraging EUCC certification for CRA conformity. Now, quickly for the audience, just in case, what is EUCC about? EUCC is the modernized European version of the International Common Criteria framework. And well, this has been adopted as a scheme with the Cybersecurity Act, right? And ultimately, what we're going to be seeing together is a practical use case when it comes to leveraging that certification, right, to actually not only leverage that potential presumption of conformity, but also fill in the gaps, right? So let's use a practical case and say that your latest product has just passed the UCC certification. And by the way, you could be using a CC certification also as an example. That could also be valid, right? You've just certified it's a cryptographic module. You pat yourself on the back. You give yourself and the team a round of applause because that was a process that lasted for months, and even sometimes more than a year. But then somebody taps your shoulder and says, "Hey, by the way, there's a CRA you need to think about." And it's actually not just about the module. It's the entire product, and one could say it's not even a product, it's the entire architecture. So you not only have the hardware and the device, you also have the potential, cloud element to it, as well as, other things that would constitute the target architecture of your, complete device. And so the question remains about how to bridge the gap, okay? And so that's funny, just telling a story, a conversation that I had with one of our clients saying, okay, like we did all this work for a CC certification, and now you're telling me that we have to start all over again? I mean, this is gonna, the teams are gonna be looking at me like desperate. And well, what we pretty much said to him is, okay, you need to see a EUCC certification, or CC certification for that matter, as a launchpad, as a toolbox for you to leverage for CRA conformity. So, because EUCC is, stable, pertinent, and suitable, and that's a mistake over here on the slide, not only for, let's say, Class 2, important Class 2 classification when it comes to the CRA, but also for the critical category, right? And the advantages are that, this offers a unified pathway for certification. You have tiered assurance levels, so you have a UCC substantial level and a high level, and this is also, recognized across all the EU member states, right, across the 27 countries. So really, a solid basis to build upon and ultimately vouch for a CRA compliance, right? So now, this is where it gets interesting. Looking at a real example, and over here, we have the Vacuum Pro X. So, this is a smart industrial vacuum cleaner. And as we said, it's not only just about a device, it's about the entire architecture that we need to be looking into. So you not only have the device, you have also the secure control board, which has been EUCC certified, you have the maintenance app, you have the cloud fleet dashboard, and well, it's just more than what has been, like the component, the element that has been certified, right? And this is what poses the first challenge, in fact, having your certified TOE, your target evaluation, versus your full target architecture. So yes, indeed, you have your specific secure control board that is certified with a secure boot, update verification, protected communications. That's great, but ultimately you need to be looking into the other elements, such as the operational firmware, the mobile app, the cloud dashboard, the remote functions, and at the end of the day, you can only go for a presumption of conformity when it comes to, let's say, the certified part, but you need to be filling out the gaps, right? So at the end of the day, the solution here and the approach is to document the mismatch. And what's left to be tackled, and ultimately make sure that there are separate assessments conducted against the CRA requirements for the non-TOE parts, right? TOE being target of evaluation. And so that's quite critical to define, to get started on such a journey. The number 2 challenge, the second challenge would be in terms of the risk logic to take into account and the risk assessment part, right? And what we've done was to leverage the security problem definition for the risk logic side of the CRA. So for each essential requirements of the CRA, we pretty much determined the applicability and mapped all the covered essential security requirements to the UCC technical elements that we've had, right, with the secure board and the elements that were certified. And at the end of the day, we were able to flag gaps and justify the non-applicability if it was the case, right? So identifying all the assets and map them with the threats such as remote misuse, malicious updates, and so on, and making sure that we were able to identify those gaps for follow-up later on, right? So the ENISA guidance suggests and supports that the security problem definition is the right way and the right method to go about justifying whether it is applicable when it comes to CRA conformity or not, right? It's not self-sufficient, but it's the right way to go about it and the right method to go about it, right? So this is how we were able to mitigate challenge number 2. Now, there's also something quite important to take into account when it comes to CRA compliance, and that's the remote data processing gap, right? So because our smart industrial vacuum cleaner has some remote fleet monitoring, some maintenance scheduling, and things happening outside of the device itself, right? And with some cloud communications happening, that essentially needs to be taken into account as part of the entire evaluation of that target architecture, and ultimately, if those elements, those data processing activities are happening remotely and are being an inherent part of the product function, they need to be assessed as such, and they are falling under CRA scope. So that absolutely needs to be handled and tackled, right? And so the way we managed to mitigate this and bring a solution for that was to update the security profile, the security problem definition for remote entities, adding some security functional requirements for cloud communication, and this is how we were able to demonstrate also on the side, the cloud side CRA conformity beyond the EUCC elements that we were able to leverage, right? So by establishing those trusted channels and implementing mutual authentication, ensuring logging, we were able to essentially, gather all address this remote data processing gap, and also make sure that for the cloud services on the side, we were able to prepare some separate CRA evidence, right? So the remote data processing element, that's something, besides the EUCC to CRA conformity, that's something that we expect will be, let's say, something that we need to bring awareness of, because all that aspect has tended to be, brushed to the side, I would say, by the manufacturers we've been talking to, and that's a determining element for them to take into account. So what we've ended up doing, to sum it up, that was to leverage that partial EUCC coverage and leverage on the proof and the evidence that we were able to get from the get-go from that secure board, and generate additional CRA evidence for those other elements that were not, that were outside of the EUCC scope, right? So again, we are stressing the importance of clear technical documentation when it comes to the specific parts for which the certification scheme was leveraged and applied, right? Be it leveraging let's say the security functional requirements, or the SPD as well. Really being clear about how we use those to go for that presumption of conformity, and making sure that when it comes to the cloud dashboard, the mobile app access controls, the vulnerability handling stuff, we were able to generate separate documentation. So essentially aligning with ENISA's position and approach when it comes to, let's say, vouching for that, let's say, a presumption of conformity and completing the picture to make sure we're able to take into account the entire target architecture. And so moving forward, because it's, when looking at, let's say, several devices and a whole fleet of devices, that approach to pretty much perform a repetitive gap analysis can be quite tiring and quite time-consuming. We are pitching this approach that we feel would be streamlining the entire conformity effort, which is to update the protection profile or the certification basis when it comes to essentially, vouching for CRA compliance. And so by updating the protection profile and incorporating those additional security problem definitions, those functional requirements, and these other elements, we are not only aligning with an ESA strategy, but also being able to leverage and reuse that structure for future certificates, right? So that updated protection profile is ensuring that we can streamline all these, let's say, compliance efforts and certifications down the road, right? So the short-term outlook on this is to provide, that technical documentation and the security target justification, and addressing the immediate needs by updating those technical files. But then on the medium term, what we are doing at Red Alert Labs is to contribute to, let's say, CRA-tailored protection profiles, and making sure that we're able to develop specific protection profiles that would be already, CRA-ready, so to speak, right? And so that's to, let's say, streamline the effort moving forward. So again, just to repeat about our approach to this, we're looking at something that's layered in terms of compliance strategy, not only leveraging on the EUCC certificate when it comes to the subsystem that we've incorporated to the entire target architecture, but also having those security problem definition-based CRA applicability analysis, making sure that the scope is clearly defined and mapped, and having mapped EUCC capabilities to the CRA essential requirements and into the CRA requirements. Making sure we're able to identify the gaps, provide supplementary CRA evidence with clear technical documentation, and also moving forward to ensure that the effort is streamlined across the board, providing those future protection profile updates, right? We think it's the way to scale those let's say, those certifications, those efforts, and let's say address those recurring gaps across the board. And so we have EUCC accelerating CRA conformity with its certified scope and technical elements and documentations, and then we're able to connect that to the full CRA scope with the added elements on top of it. So when it comes to this case study number 2, unfortunately, we're not in a position to say much about it because it's still ongoing, but there's one point that we want to be bringing up over here, and that's when it comes to the reset, the default configuration elements that can be, let's say, found as part of the EUCC parameters. So EUCC is saying that you need to have a reset to default configuration, which is something that can be leveraged from a CRA standpoint, except that that default configuration needs to be secure by default, right? A secure default state. And so, again, this is really leveraging those elements that EUCC or CC is giving us and making sure we're adding the right elements to stick with the CRA requirements, right? So again, the reset to default configuration can be leveraged. It's just that that default configuration needs to be secure from the get-go. And so, to conclude on the presentation, we really think that EUCC is the perfect launchpad when it comes to CRA conformity, especially for Class 2 and critical classified products. And again, the EUCC or CC, let's say scheme, the EUCC scheme can be quite complex with a lot of acronyms from SLRs to SPDs and such. But at the end of the day, for anything from smart cars to industrial devices, this is actually the best way for you to let's say, get ready for the end of 2027, keeping in mind that, as it was said earlier, the CRA has its first regulatory deadline on September 11th, and that's about the vulnerability reporting and handling aspect, right? So then again, when it comes to EUCC, it might not be addressing the continuous monitoring aspect of things. So then again, that would be something to be added on top. But at the end of the day, for most of the elements, as we saw, you really have the foundation for a quicker path to compliance when it comes to your final target architecture. And so that's about it when it comes to the deck, and just sharing a quick word about Red Alert Labs. We're actually a NITSEF, so accredited lab when it comes to UCC evaluations, and we've been working with a lot of device manufacturers, not only as part of pilots, but also projects to, let's say, help and support manufacturers make that bridge, right? Leverage their EUCC or CC certification for CRA compliance moving forward. And well, I thank you for your attention, and if you have any questions, I will be happy to transfer that to my teammates and make sure they get back to you. Thank you.
Can we have questions, David?
We can.
To the extent
I'll take them.
we saw the reference to colleagues, so don't worry, no worries.
Keep them coming,
We were
we'll
not
take
going to
them.
put you under the bus, don't worry. There's one over here.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Katia Rojas from SUSE. I have a question. How scalable is this solution? When we certify under EUCC, under common criteria, we are focusing in a target of evaluation and a specific configuration that we evaluate. Is this that the presumption of conformity only goes to this product, or can we extend this to the different flavors of a product? Because as a vendor, we have, for example, operating system, multiple versions of that product, and the investment that we do in EUCC for a specific product, if that could be shared with other these flavors, could be a good solution. Mm-hmm. I would like to know if this has been thought and addressed in that way.
Thank you for your question, and I think that's definitely what the update of the protection profile is trying to address, right? The ability for us to not having to start with gap analyses left and right depending on the versions of the OS and the other elements that could be changing. So I will be more than happy to put you in touch with our certification director, who's been on this and could really go in depth about why this makes sense, right, and why this is considered to be scalable, for sure.
Another one over here.
Thank you, David, for your presentation. I think you have a unique gift to actually present very formal and dry subjects in a very thrilling and entertaining manner, so thank you very much. I am Michael Meissner. I have asked a question before, and I try not to ask too many questions, not to take too much time from the other people who want to ask questions in all the other tracks. But here, I want to respond on the previous question. Yes, I think, well, in my practice as a certifier, I work as a certifier for BSI. A lot of our customers, they describe several versions of one product in one security target. So I think you can do that, as long as you do not expect future versions to be evaluated and covered by a certificate, because a certificate is always product version depending. So, but it's not limited to one version. You can, if the evaluation often is even easier if you evaluate several versions in one go. But also I want to give an annotation to you because you spoke from my heart when you said that we should update protection profiles. And here, I think it's my opinion, you can actually catch two flies with one strap because one new requirement is also, after the certification, the maintenance phase and, the vulnerability observation period. Yeah. And this hasn't been, in the focus before, but now under EUCC it is. And this also brings a new focus on recertifications. There will be more in the future. I am convinced of it. And for as long as I have been a certifier, there was also always a critic, towards common criteria that it takes too long time, that it costs too much money. But there are now strategies to actually dramatically shorten this time. And I do not know if you heard about the new ISO document 9569, which actually introduces patch management. So it focuses on patches. This has some prerequisites. Some prerequisite is also, it has a dependency on FLR. Don't want to go into detail. Just want to say, the EUCC limits somehow in some areas the, flexibility of the common criteria. For example, for some products and some assurance levels, it makes protection profile claims a requirement. The common criteria doesn't do that, but EUCC does it. Mm-hmm. And in order to avoid clashes with protection profile compatibility, if you update the protection profile, I suggest to everybody also consider patch management because then you make the protection profile fit for the future. And that's all I wanted to say.
Very good point.
Thank you.
Any more questions? One more. 1, 2. Oh my God. It's like.
Thank you. Hey, my name is Mathieu Nerve. I work for HP. Quick question on the gap with RDP. Imagine we have a SaaS service that's identified having RDP under the categorization. Could you elaborate on conformity testing, meaning how scrutinized will the RDP in the SaaS be evaluated and what to expect from a conformity testing perspective for that RDP categorized in a SaaS environment? It's always unclear a little bit for CRA for us.
Yeah, I appreciate your question. And again, I'm going to be very honest with you. I'm going to have to take this to my team because if I try to answer with basic elements, that's not going to do you a service. But definitely, we can follow up, and I can answer the question.
Thanks, David. That's totally fine. It's totally fine. Thank you. We have Jakob.
Thank you. Thank you also for the presentation. I have a question because you took the path of having the main part certified in common criteria, and then everything else in the product. I'm talking about the vacuum cleaner, and the rest as a protection profile. But won't that cause you also some possible issues because common criteria is a wonderful tool, but it will also forces you, to do the patch management. If you want to change anything in the product, you need to follow common criteria. You need to do recertification in certain cases, even for the part that is not relevant, because I understand the whole device now have the certificate. Could you maybe clarify that? And if that is, in your opinion, the best way, or maybe we can do something better because you propose protection profile, but this will cause the same issues, I believe.
Well, all that I can say to you is that we thought, the updating of the protection profile would be able to, help us scale our approach, right, with the multiple versions involved. But then again, when it comes to the patch management aspect and the recertification elements, that may be something that can be followed up on by my director of certification. But I appreciate your question because I think it's quite valid. So thank you.
Thanks, David. Any more? One more. We take one more. Last one.
Thank you. I'm Bill Yang from Brightside. So I'm also from a evaluation lab. We're also looking into this NSI, the UCC and CRA interplay thing. But what I encountered in the question is that also ETSI is actively creating a lot of verticals, and so that's why I'm a little bit puzzled. Like, is really going EUCC a very effective way for developers, especially for important class 1 and 2? So probably for critical one, yes, but for important class 1 and 2, there's already verticals being developed. So is that really going into UCC, which may take a lot of time, or you need a more formal process things? Is that really, is really a question like, is this a good way forward for, yeah? How do you view on that?
I think it's a great open question. I would say that as far as our leadership goes, at Red Alert Labs, we think so. We think UCC is a great vehicle. Mostly for I would say important class 2 and critical, right? And well, the work that has been done by Etsy and our involvement on some projects would certainly indicate that, right? Then again, open question, right? Will it stand the test of time, and will it be verified, in the long run? I guess we'll find out, but that's our conviction. That's what we're, let's say, pushing forward at least at this time.
Thanks very much, David, and thank you very much. Appreciate it really for taking all these questions, even though some of them are not your area. So really good. Thank you very much again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming to the last speaker this morning before the networking break, on the topic of designing for lifecycle security and post-market responsibility. And we have with us today Sébastien, help me, Cole, is it Collet or Cole? Okay, okay. Who is the head of security at Infineon Technologies in Germany. And so please tell us, what's the perfect preparation? How does it look like in terms of continuous compliance? Thank you.
My very best. Thank you very much. Which button is it?
It's the green one.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm Sebastian. I run the security department under the connected secure system at Infineon Technologies. Usually when it comes to CRA, in my own function, I ask more questions than I deliver answers. Just because it's on my table, I have to solve this problem. So normally I try to look for solution, and this is what I want to share with you today. Okay, my predecessor did a great job in introducing the CRA. In a nutshell, there are millions of devices which will get connected, and I think Mrs. von der Leyen said if everything gets connected, well, everything can be hacked. And indeed, there is a lot of attack in this world. We see also with the rise of artificial intelligence, that it has a kind of industrialization. In the past, it was some kind of hacker in their garage, and now today it's really on an industrial scale. And coming on top of that, we have a kind of heterogeneous landscape in terms of products, security architecture, vendors, and so forth. So this is, I would say, the three main ingredients why there was a need for the CRA. Well, if you come to the CRA essential requirements, you can see three big topics, three big area. Well, you need to have product security somehow. I don't want to go into details. Then you have to put in place kind of vulnerability management process with the timelines we know from the CRA, and you have to provide some information and labeling aspect, which is more the administrative parts. With the two first slides, I would say you can find tons of webinars and presentation which just say the very same things. And when it occurs to me to prepare this presentation, I think, okay, or my colleague, I think I've seen her, told me you have to read the CRA when you come there in order to deliver some message. So this is what I did. And when it comes to the designing some products, thank you. Thank you, Philip. So I land on Article 13 and 14, and I skip everything else, okay? So these are the obligations to the manufacturer, which I am, and for which our product need to be designed for. To this article, okay, you have to establish cybersecurity into the entire product life cycle. You have to go for a conformity assessment. I will come to that also, and to maintain documentation. Okay, if you don't do that and you did some mistakes, and you have to pay a lot of money. So this is, I would say, the motivation of our whole management And this is how the legislation framework in the EU works. So I did the job. I went to the CRA article, and then you know what? When I started to read the Article 13, it's really difficult. I mean, maybe I'm not the expert in legislation, I'm not the expert in standardization, but when I need to solve issues, I need to understand what the problems are. So it's not really comprehensible. It's I need to go really through each article into the very end. It occurs also that so there is no specific orders how the rate is written down. Some requirements mixed up a little bit the product life cycle. So you have at the creation part of a product and in the maintenance part. And well, it makes a little bit complicated to understand. So I did the job furthermore, and you have to go through this with me today. So I slide the elephant. So in order to come to the result I have presented in the first slides, okay? So you turn out to be that, well, you have the big part of the risk assessment. I think at paragraph 2, 3, 4, and 7, when you have to perform risk assessment and redo risk assessment upon changes, or redo risk assessments when things are changing in the field. And then you have a big bunch of product-related, I would call them like this, product-related requirement. You have to design according to the Annex Part 1. I'll come also into that a little bit later. Of course, you have to take into account some changes. Then perform conformity assessment, your due diligence check. I think the Commission calls this the upstream, when you integrate some parts in your final product, some integrated components. Technical documentation, and so forth. Then you have, I would call them a kind of administrative part. You have to offer a single point of contact, cooperation with authorities. When you cease your operation as a company, you have to do a little bit of information. And also, in which is Article 14, to report vulnerability. So in a nutshell, when I need to, I would say, implement the CRA, I need first to build secure product, and then at some point of times, regain secure status. And all of that, if you want to continuous compliancy, well, you need to kind of cycles. You build up a product to be compliant, then by some magic, you lose a compliancy, and then you need to regain the status, and then you have again in secure state, okay? In that game, the Article 14 says you need to be transparent to the outer world and provide some information. Well, the point there is, if you read the CRA and you read it again and again, you come to the feeling that, well, manufacturers just do mistakes. They introduce vulnerabilities, they don't know what they do. And this is why you lose the compliancy. But the truth also, or what belongs to the truth, is that there would not be any CRA or any vulnerability if there would not be any attacks, okay? And so you just don't use compliancy just because times goes by, or just because you made a mistake, but just because there are some attacks out of them. That may be a kind of, I would say, platitude, but it is a real core of the CRA. So I think in my talk, it's worth to have a look to the attack. And this is where now I took some liberty with regard to my predecessor. It's not really matching all the formal aspects of standardization and this kind of stuff, but it's really the view of a developer. And having a semiconductor here on the stage, you might have some more hardware or semiconductors inside. So it's really, I would say, helpful to have a look into the attack world, because as I said, to me, it's the very core of the CRA, and to try to classify them. So it's not to be meant as a full taxonomy of the attacks. It's much more bigger than this, but you have a kind of structure into that. So you have the, don't know if, oops, sorry, how do I come back? So you have, I don't know if it's an attack method, but you have some attack on the architecture or on the concept, let's say on protocol, on cryptography. You have some logical attack, which are, let's say, when you do have some software flows, very well-known buffer overflow, code injection. You have some physical attack, which are, as the name says, you have some manipulation of the device, like invasive manipulation or semi-invasive. So you have laser fault injection, voltage glitching. You can also extract signal out of your device, like power or time side channel attack. Focus ion beam can also be used to manipulate devices and so on. So this is the physical attack. And then far, far, far below, you may also have a kind of category attack on the supply chain where some malicious forces, let's say, do intercept deliveries or do physical replacement of firmware, this kind of stuff. As a first stage here, I would just include the cyber or the supply chain attack or the attack on the supply chain because it's just not part of the CRA because it's not cyber, okay? It's indirectly part of the CRA because you need to consider this kind of attack in your product if it's in part if you're in the intended usage of your product and in during the risk assessment. You have some threat coming onto the supply chain, then you need to consider this and to develop the adequate measure in your product, let's say, against masquerade or rogue attack. I would also go for the next one, the architecture. Well, you have, it's more difficult to find some example on that one, but I would say if you do introduce some single desk encryption in your product, then it might not be resilient enough for, I would say, brute forcing attack. So this is rather the topology, and this is where the CRA, I would say, come from is where, where the CRA just postulate, if you read the CRA a couple of times, that you just have to discover stuff, okay? Just like there, it's not being invented, it's just to be, I would say, open up, okay? So there is a kind of automatism in the CRA which says, okay, the job is quite easy, don't introduce a vulnerability, and if some are being discovered, okay, just fix them. Which is, I would say, true for a big part, and for sure the CRA just focus on, or they're not focus, but is the main part of the CRA. I think in the talk previously, it was meant like the IoT kind of devices were on the scope of it. So when you come to a coding error, misconfiguration, this is the things which are there, okay, and that can be discovered. But there is another dimension of the attacks is that, well, you have this kind of dynamic, okay? You have an evolution of the state of the art, and you have an evolution which can be disrupted. If you go to the first one, to the architecture one, you can say, okay, if you think hard, well, you can have some attack on the Wi-Fi protocol, the WPA2 protocol handshake, which 2017, there was an attack published on that one. So were there a mistake from the manufacturer point of view? Well, they just implemented the standard, but it turned out to be that because some people think hard, they just find out some vulnerability there. Another example, if you think even harder, okay, you have like quantum computing, let's say 2030 something, then also asymmetric cryptography would be at stake. And this is where I think it's not part of the CRA so much, where you need to think of with other regulation. For the logical attack, well, you can say also that there is a kind of evolution of the state of the art. I would say in 2007, there was a return-oriented programming, which was exploiting some property of coding, and then it came out to be a new attack, and then it was taken into account, and then it becomes as a known attack. For physical attack, it's I would say a mix of improving the efficiency of the methods from the laser injection. You have better laser, better timing. For side channel, you have better method to capture signals, better mathematic model, and so on. And you can combine all this attack. A kind of disruption was 1996, where side channel attack was introduced in this world. Why do I explain all this to you? Is that the CRA, in my eyes, just focus very much on the on this one, where attack has to be, or vulnerability have to be discovered. Okay, they do not focus so much on. It's part of the CRA, but it's not really to be sensed in all the article where attacks are being invented. So your design was fine at a certain point in time, and just because of the evolution of the state of the art, it became weaker. Okay. Then having a deeper look into the physical aspect, it's well, when you have this kind of physical attack, usually speaking, you have to have some kind of equipment, oscilloscope, laser, whatsoever. You have to have a very deep knowledge of the product. You have to have the product at hand. So I would say it's more on the lab condition. And so this means these kind of attacks are not exploitable under the practical or operational condition of the product being investigated. And when you look to the definition of a vulnerability out of the CRA, it's become clear that, well, under the CRA, only attack are vulnerabilities or lead to a vulnerability when it's being used by an adversary under practical operational conditions. So for me, this was one of the first aspects where I need to think of in the organization is when you have some vulnerability on through physical attack, well, you are not per CRA under the vulnerability definition. Okay, indeed, you are in the EUCC. We just had it before, where for critical product, of course, there is also a vulnerability handling procedure under EUCC, and being certified at high level, for example, the so-called 1.5, well, you have to take care of this kind of attack as well. But for the CRA, at least to my interpretation, this kind of physical attack being done under lab condition are not seen by the CRA unless you are in the critical product category and under the EUCC. Okay, now coming to the evolution and the disruption of the state of the art. Well, we have seen the timeline of the CRA, which is kind of challenging. But if we go for the evolution or disruption of the state of the art, then you need first to understand the attack, okay? Because it's brand new. So the mitigation might require, I would say, first understanding, then conceptual change maybe, and also may take longer, okay? And well, that makes it a challenge for the manufacturer if we need to comply with the timeline when you have to face this kind of brand new aspect. With regard to the first column, well, I would say it's like job as usual, okay? You just discover something which is really known. You have to do some root cause analysis, of course, but concepts are known. You just need to develop some mitigation, verify, and validate. So this is the most easiest part, I would say, from the CRA. So if I need to combine all this in one picture and one shot, I would say, and I know I need to speak about designing things, but we're not here to get some lecture on VHDL. I would say on the pre-market phase, where you do ID, concept, and development, well, you have to build secure product. And this is, as an engineer, an optimization problem. You have, well, first you look on the mistakes, okay, on the vulnerabilities that need to be discovered. For that one, you need to minimize the occurrence. And this is where the CRA comes, where having secure by design. So minimize the attack surface, you introduce some best practice coding of your choice, you have a secure programming language, and you do not introduce, of course, known vulnerabilities that you pick up from any kind of CVE database, and you do the due diligence when you integrated some subcomponent into your product. Why don't I say just have the occurrence to zero? Well, we all know that you always have a kind of potential mistakes in your design, in your way to do that. So it's just minimizing the occurrence. Having that said, on the other part, you also need to minimize the escapees. Okay, so I would say increase the test coverage of your validation. This is where you go for the conformity assessment. This is CRA terminology. Let's say for us, very concretely, this means design review, that you introduce software security testing, static testing, dynamic testing, whatsoever. Also red teaming, if you have the bandwidth for that. Penetration testing, third-party evaluation, also this kind of automatical SBOM CVE check. So when you have done this, okay, you have done your the best you can do to minimize the number of known weaknesses, known potential weaknesses, and to maximize your test coverage. Still, and I would not say it's a mistake, it's just for all of you who have developed software, you know that there is always SKPs in your testing. So you have to manage the SKPs, okay? So this is where I would say, in my view, the CRA comes and says, you need to have vulnerability handling. It's for this kind of mistakes. It says, you have done your best can do at the beginning, and then it comes up, well, you have some slip, some gap in your coverage, and you have some SKPs in the field. And there, I would like to introduce, I would say, two categories which also were given in the guidance draft from the Commission and the CRA. You have vulnerabilities that can be mounted or exploited, under practical operation. And this is where you have to go for vulnerability management, regular testing, defining corrective measures, and also securely deploy them and communicate all over your stakeholder to be transparent as per CRA requirement. But you have also some SKP which are can be exploited under theoretical conditions. This is the one before, when you have some physical attacks where you need this equipment, knowledge, and this kind of stuff. Which it's not, I would say, covered by the CRA. So here it's covered by the EUCC assurance continuity. And there is this category, the SOA evolution, which is to me a little bit different than before, because this is where it has not been discovered, but it has been invented. Okay, and here this is for us when designing product. I've seen before in one of the presentation was it's not fortune telling, but here you have a little bit to project into the near future. At least for your development life cycle, let's say for hardware from 1 to 3 years, and then market introduction and so on. So when you start designing to start developing your concept, you need to think of what could be potential involution, okay? Which is very difficult. And sometimes it turns out that you're completely wrong. So you have to observe the evolution of the standard of the art in trends, in conferences, from I would say, kind of attacker communities. You have to work with academia. One source also with EUICC is the maintenance organization, the ISAC, with the technical subgroup there dealing with attack, physical attack mainly. There will be a new group created for software attack. So, or you perform your own research, okay? So this means you try to compete with all these millions of people around there with your, I would say, resources to try to find out what is the next step and to be prepared for that. So either you have the bandwidth, the resources, the money to set this up, or you rely on some manufacturer who do that for you and just include this in their product the best they can. This is also, I would say, covered by EUCC and the assurance continuity, because EUCC very much rely on this forward thinking on the attack and not just think what is the state of the art today, but just also trying to project what will be in the next years. So that would be the entire, I would say, landscape, what you have to do. But having that said, I still don't have told you what you need to design for, which is, I would say, much more difficult even than the part before. The CRA is not prescriptive, like many, and it's not a critic point, it's like many, I would say, legislation or regulation. But the CRA tells us what to do. You need to, and some example in the part 1 of the Annex 1, to ensure protection from unauthorized access, to provide authentication, identity, access management, to protect the integrity of stored data, to protect the confidentiality, to securely distribute updates. Okay, so you can implement this kind of stuff, but when it comes to design, you say, okay, but how to do that, and which is, I would say, one of the biggest issue, because in security, well, you're it's a holistic concept, and you need to have, I would say, holistic thinking when you design your product. Okay, the two following slide is a little bit on the designing for end-to-end security. So first, you need to implement these security functionalities. So there is secure boot aspect, secure key generation, a secure update, and here the secure update, it's an easy thing to say, but manufacturing a product, you need to, I would say, open up the update mechanism down to the MCU, because MCU is part of the CRA. So it's so you have to think this up from the very beginning, which is not the case sometimes in the product of today. You have to have secure attestation, maybe also to implement some runtime device trust, to secure cryptographic execution, generating keys, using keys, storing keys, PQC ready, and all that with the tamper resistance properties if required in the category where you are. And this is the first one I need to apologize there. When you ask a German guys and you get a German answer, well, you can follow the some recommendations, some technical guidelines. The one I know, other one from the BSI, a technical regulation on software lifecycle, for example, or on the CRA itself, or, for example, using cryptographic mechanism. It's been developed by BSI, but there is a lot of exchange with the industry association to gather feedback from the industry. So this can be a great help to find some working point in your design on how to implement stuff. And now this is the second one I need to apologize, is when you ask a German semiconductor manufacturer, then you got also an answer which is very much founded on hardware solution, okay? What the CRA does not say is that, what the CRA does not prescribe is the kind of architecture you need to establish, okay? Just like observing some standalone product next to another, having these requirements, but there is no, I would say, hint on the architecture you need to, or you could implement. And I'm deeply convinced that software alone cannot protect software, okay? So the best way you can build up a resilient architecture, not only at T0, but also along the T maintenance, is to build up a kind of hardware chain of trust, starting with a hardware root of trust, which is a strong foundation compared to a software-only solution, which can be changed with relative ease. You just reduce the attack surface to the small code base of a hardware root of trust, which are tiny products, and you can, from this onward, change the trust along your application, along your system. Here also some I would say not recommendation, but some observation. There is a good approach, in my eyes, from the NIST, the IR IET 320, we just described the hardware-enabled security, and also a good way to protect the cryptography in depth is to just put all your cryptographic stuff, which is, I would say, the core of security, okay? When you do cybersecurity, you always come to cryptography, and it starts with generating prime number, out of them keys, using these keys, doing encryption, and it's good to have this really deep in your architecture, where it's really difficult for an attacker to get access to it. So, coming to an end, the main takeaway, well, with the CRA and all these articles, it's really an extensive framework. I do think that it introduced a resilience into the European community, this for sure, mainly focused on the IoT large-scale devices. It will be a great of efforts. I know I have this topic on my desk, and I know also having some talks with different stakeholders that we are all on the same page, trying to figure out how to bring compliancy for legacy product and so on and so forth. So it will be a significant effort, but it will also bring higher resilience across the supply chain. As I said, the CRA focuses on, I would say, it's my view, I may be wrong, on a standalone kind of view. And if you want to do the job good, you need to go for cybersecurity in-depth with a layered approach in order to have a sound security architecture throughout your application. one aspect which I came out to find out reading the CRA is, well, attacks are taken into account, vulnerability are taken into account, but to me, the evolution and the disruption in this evolving attack is not really taken into account in the numbers, in the timeline, and so on. So I think from the guidance of the Commission, there might be some I would say some room to improve or to play there. And I'm also deeply convinced that for manufacturer, where we would just see the CRA as just more than something to be compliant to, but just embrace the CRA, can also have a leader position in this cybersecurity market. Having that said, I'm over with my talk.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sébastien. And I think we can probably have a lot of legal discussions on Article 13, from a lawyer to a security expert, but I'm not going to go into that now. It's too boring, I think, for this session. We can do a separate seminar almost. There's a question over there.
Hey, thanks. So I'm wondering in your opinion on handling vulnerabilities in hardware, right? So if, let's say, something like Spectrum meltdown happened with CRA fully in force, what do you see practically happening? Like a full solution within 72 hours or 14 days? Or?
No, I don't think so.
So what would happen? And what is expected to happen?
Yeah, I think, I think it will be clear for all stakeholders that you can have a solution in 24 hours or 72 hours. I think the main aspect is the communication, the Article 14, where you show transparency. But also one thing is that when do you know, when do you start to count, okay? When it is a known exploitable vulnerabilities, and there is some room there for the manufacturer and all the, I would say, the stakeholder in this ecosystem to work on the countermeasure, deploy the countermeasure until you need to declare it as a known vulnerabilities. So.
Follow up.
Sorry, I thought it was known when you discover it, right? Not when you have a fix for it.
Yeah, but there is some interpretation there when it starts to be, when does the Article 14 start? I'm happy to get some discussion to that because, as I said, I have more questions than answers. And one of those is this one. When does it start? When it's as a manufacturer, when you have a coordinated vulnerability disclosure, for example, so you get the first point in time where you get the information, you are the only one, and maybe with a market surveillance body and some other stakeholder, but a very small circle, okay? And you start on this problem. So you start investigation, confirmation, developing countermeasures and so on. And then you have a point in time where you said, okay, now we go for information in sync with the owner of the vulnerability work. So, and there, I would be happy to have some legal advice. Where is the CRA start from?
Well, I'm not going to go into the legal framework now, but I think there will be, like we've seen with other regimes, just quickly, maybe we see guidelines, right? When you think about GDPR and breach notifications and incident and so on response, there you see there have been guidelines about this whole topic, when is the company becoming aware, when is it discovered, and so on. So hopefully we will get some guidelines. But I have one more question here before we break.
Thank you for your talk. But I have a question. Yeah, I know like a company like Infineon, the leading chip vendors already put a lot of security mechanism in place, like secure bootloaders and random number generator, as you mentioned here. But the security is a holistic view. How did you see the work is to enable device makers? Many of them have no idea how to access your security features in here. For example, even you have a random number generator. What if they put the same keys, generated outside into your chip? And how do you make your security features more accessible to device manufacturers?
I wish I would know. I mean, there is a great job of education there, and I think, my dear competitors and all this, I would say, ecosystem are really making a lot of effort to bring this education into the the community, and with webinars on security issues, and everybody, I would say, offers this solution, like kind of easy to use and easy to integrate security kind of aspect, so you don't have to bother about it, we do this for you. But still, you're right, I mean, the architecture is key on how to integrate these kind of components, how to develop the security over the whole integration up to the application, which is a challenge, I agree. Today I don't have the 100% answer, but it's a big challenge, but it's an opportunity for people like Infineon or my dear colleague from Hamburg or south of France.
Maybe you can come back next year and to clarify more of this. So thank you very much for this presentation.